Welcome back.
It's now 8 minutes away from 7 o'clock, and as promised before the break, we have been joined by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable Wilfred Elrington. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning, Belize. Thank you for having me.
Now, Minister, of course, since last weekend, the conversation has centered around what transpired in the Sarstoon with the military from Guatemala preventing the Belize territorial volunteers access. Let's start off with your first reaction. Of course, there was a release prior to the trek by the ministry. So what was your reaction when you heard what was happening in the Sarstoon region?
Well, I expected something like that to happen. I think people need to know the history to be able to appreciate what is now happening. The situation with the Sarstoon and Guatemala has not changed since 1939. 21st of September 1939, the Guatemalans purported to repudiate the 1859 treaty, which established a boundary between Belize and Guatemala. And since that time, they have been claiming the Sarstoon and the island in the Sarstoon. That's nothing new. And that claim remained during the time the British were here, all during the time of our struggle for independence and after our independence, when Prime Minister Price was in office, up to the time he died. When the British were here, they did not take the kind of adventuristic initiatives that Will Mejia is dealing with. As a matter of fact, he's the first Belizean I know of who had been going down there. But the Guatemalans are saying that this is our land, and they have taught their people that this is our land. As a matter of fact, they have told them that the whole of Belize is their land. And what has transpired is that about 2 years ago, the territorial volunteers started to go there, and the Guatemalans have resented it. And because of that resentment, whenever they hear that Belizeans now are going down there, trying to assert, in their view, ownership of the island, they then prepare for the Belizeans to come. And that is the reason why you had such a large troop of people. I imagine we would have responded in like manner if we thought that people are coming into our country, which belongs to us. As a matter of fact, we do protect our borders and try to prevent the Guatemalans from coming in and interfering with our assets, whether they be our chate or whether it's a Mayan artifacts or whatever it is. So it is a kind of nationalistic thing, and you have to understand and see the Guatemalan side of it. They are saying that this is theirs. We are saying that it is ours. But we know, and those of us who know the history and those of us who are in leadership position, from George Price, the British, come right down to the rest of us, we understand that it is disputed territory. And if it is disputed territory and you go there, you are likely to have this response.
Now, I think what is difficult for people to be able to accept with this issue is that even though the area is under dispute, really it is a perception by Guatemala. For Belizeans, it is a certainty. The Sarstoon is ours. The difference of activity in the area is very clear. The Guatemalans roam around the Sarstoon River, venture into waters that have been captured on camera into Belizean waters, and have become increasingly confrontational with not only military personnel but also civilians. Versus the Belizeans, who we know this river is ours, the island is ours. It's almost that the government is telling us, don't go there, it's yours, but don't go there, even though others are venturing into the area.
What I try to explain over and over, and I'll give you a practical experience. In the village of Kamalote, you had a family named Garbat who had been given a lease to a piece of land. That same piece of land, a man named Patrick Reyes had given a lease to. So both of them claiming it. So they started fighting over it. One morning, Patrick Reyes dressed himself picked up his shotgun and went to the piece of land and said to the Garbarts who live right next door, if you think you bad and you own it, you come into this place. Well, the Garbarts went in. Patrick Rice shot both of them dead. Patrick Rice is now in jail, and I was a judge who presided over that case. Whether it is domestic land claim or whether it is international borders, it is a very emotional thing. Same thing with the Israelis and the Palestinians. In 1948, when the United Nations divided Palestine and gave Israel half and Palestine half, shortly after they started to fight, they have been fighting for the last 6 or 7 years. Thousands of people have been killed, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars have been spent. Destruction is untold. It is not fundamentally different from our situation, where you have two countries claiming the same thing. You can only resolve that by some decision that is taken that both parties are prepared to accept. What would be our response if the Guatemalans in that area were starting to come across and say, Belize es nuestro, let us take it? Our defense, our military people will have to take action because that is what they're being paid for, that's what they're being trained for. So it's the same thing with the Guatemalans. They say it is theirs, and so they will not countenance people from Belize going across as if it is ours. It's a reality. The British understood that. George Price understood that. All of us understood that. And it is only in recent times, I don't think anybody else other than Wilmer here and the people who here in Belize are encouraging him and sponsoring him and instigating his actions. Those are the only people who have encouraged this kind of behavior. It never existed before I was born in 1948. And between 48 and up to 2000, maybe 2010, 12, I never heard of this kind of thing happening. Now, you don't take the Guatemalans lightly because it was in 1948 that they first threatened to invade Belize. And because of that, the British garrison was stationed in Belize. And between 1948 and 1981, the British had to strengthen their garrison. They had to send down the Ark Royal, which is an aircraft carrier. They had to send the Harriers. They had to strengthen the garrison several occasions because of the belligerence of the Guatemalans. The British took the threat of the Guatemalans very, very seriously. And they understood the kind of consequences that you're going to have from a military invasion or incursion by Guatemala. We have to understand that. And we have no defense guarantee. There is absolutely no nation in the world that has agreed to guarantee our security. The Americans are guaranteeing the Taiwanese, they are guaranteeing the Japanese, they are guaranteeing the South Koreans. We have nobody guaranteeing us. And the British have made it clear to us they are taking an even-handed policy on it. And the difficulty in trying to solicit sympathy from the international community with respect to this kind of activity is that the international community understands fully the ramifications and implications of what is going on, because there's nothing recent about this. So what do you say to the international community when you ask them to help us? They will say, first of all, you have a dispute that has existed since 1939. We can't take sides. We have to have a clarity as to what is the proper legal situation. Get this matter resolved at the ICJ, and then we're going to go from there.
The issue with the BTV, though, one of the things that is continuously called to question is why, the press releases that go out before any expedition takes place talks about the safety and the security. However, the request has been put in multiple times to have the Belize Defense Force travel along with the territorial volunteers. The territorial volunteers are Belizeans. They're citizens of this country who want to traverse into a portion of our country.
The Belize government is not going to get itself involved in that because it is regarded, certainly I regard it as a provocative act. Let me tell you this. Every single day, thousands of Belizeans, I would imagine, go across to Guatemala. Nothing happened. Every minute you see Belizeans going across, either down PG, as a matter of fact, they work almost as if there is no border there. In Benke, everybody go across. There's not a problem. But this perception of this Belize territorial volunteers, in the eyes of the Guatemalans, give them the perception that you are making some kind of territorial claim on them. And that's why it elicits this response. And I do not know how Belizean people find it so difficult to understand that. We would take the same position if we thought that people are looking to make territorial claims on us. We have to see it that way, because that is the way. Ordinary Belizeans are not stopped from going across to Guatemala. Our military are not stopped from going across to Guatemala. They have been doing it for years, and they continue to do it, and that's their job. But it is only with respect to this group of people that you have this response, and that is because of the perception of the Guatemalans.
Now, we've had varying reports come out as well that there's also been the shadowing, as they may call it, of military forces, and they have to check in prior to access to the Sarstoon. Are you aware of that, and where does the ministry and by extension the government stand on that particular issue?
I am aware of the fact that there has been shadowing, and apparently that has been going on for some time. I'm not aware of the fact that they have to check in. That is not my understanding. But how you deal with that? You can only deal with that ultimately by seeking to get the claim resolved. Because what do you want us to do? Go across there and attack the Guatemalan vessels that are shadowing them? Is that what you want us to do? That is not a viable option. How you handle it is that you get it resolved.
Now, go ahead.
We've been talking a lot about the road to the ICJ for quite some time, and that is the only solution. But in the meantime, people see this issue as worsening, and that at some juncture you're going to have perhaps people losing their lives over this particular issue. When the incident occurred, you stated on behalf of the ministry that a strongly worded note of disapproval would go to the Guatemalan government. This comes, of course, with the backdrop of the statements made by the foreign minister and also by the newly elected president. Where are we in terms of, and was that note dispatched? And what has been the response?
We dispatched a note then, and we dispatched another note this week. But you need to understand, if it is a perception that of the Guatemalans that we are committing some kind of invasion in their land, no note is going to help us. You have to understand that. But I find it so difficult to appreciate how Belizeans, and certainly I think it's not the majority of Belizeans, because as I walk the street, people shout out commending me for the way we are handling these matters. But look at what is happening in Europe at this point in time. Look at the massive waves of migrants that are going across from Middle East and from Africa to Europe, and the countries there can't stop them. The entire European Union, with all its resources, cannot stop innocent people fleeing for refuge into their countries by the hundreds of thousands. Countries have limitations, and small countries like Belize have even more limitations. We have tremendously great limitations. We have the Venezuelans and the Guyanese have similar border problems. You know the kind of problems Guyana is now suffering from? Where Venezuela send their gunboat to prevent people whom the Guyana government have given licenses to explore for petroleum from doing the exploration. The Guyanese are really, really seeking for assistance everywhere they can turn. Here in CARICOM, at the United Nations, at the Commonwealth. Small countries are limited in how you deal with these things. But it is not surprising, and the United Nations has provided for it. We have institutions at the United Nations and the OAS that deals with these issues. And this issue has been dealt with over the years by the Belizean government, successive Belizean government. More than that, the People's United Party government, from 1971 at the very least until 1981 independence, were trying to negotiate with Guatemala in relation to this issue, and including the Sarstoon Island. As a matter of fact, the last negotiation that was held between the Belizeans, headed by Assad Schuman, post-independence 1981, dealt with Guatemala's claim for the Sarstoon Island. It's nothing new. It has always been there. The only thing new is that people like Wilmer and his instigators seem just to have discovered that we have that dispute, and they are going now to try to resolve it. But it is being dealt with. It is being dealt with by the proper authorities, and it has been dealt with safely. We have not had confrontation. Nobody has been killed. We have not no aggression from the Guatemalans. This
so you
is
do
a
not
recent,
consider the engagement?
This is a recent thing which started with these people. And you notice the people from Punta Gorda don't go with me here, because the people from Punta Gorda generally have a good, harmonious relationship with these people. They are over every minute they are in Guatemala, whether it's through the Sarstoon or whether it is through the sea. It's a very fluid relationship. This has always existed. Now, always.
Minister, you made several points just now, and I want to speak about a couple of them. First of all, it was the position of the People's United Party.
Yeah.
As you know, they've recently, under the new leadership, they have recently formed a new advisory committee and are seeking to re-engage with government to be able to have a bipartisan approach on dealing with the issue now. Not necessarily the road to the ICJ, but what is taking place in the Sarstoon. I want to be able to hear your perspective on that as to the openness
The only thing that is new about that is the attitude of the new leader, who has made it clear. He's not talking about consulting. He's saying that he would like to see the matter resolved at the ICJ, and he is appointing a committee to deal with it, a committee of foreign ministers.
Well,
6 of
not
them.
only the ICJ.
But every time I met with the Guatemalans, there was a PUP representative there. In the early days, Eamon used to go with us, and more recent times it was Lisa. So we have always had a bipartisan approach, always. Another significant thing Belizean people need to know is that during the last election campaign, whereas the People's United Party made it a huge issue and attacked myself and the Prime Minister incessantly on it, I never once responded. You will notice, I never once responded. You know why? Because the issue is too big and important. I would prefer to lose an election rather than to make this issue a partisan political issue. It's too important. This is our survival. This is the security of our nation and our country. I cannot banalize it. I will not allow it to become a political football. I prefer to lose an election. So look at my record. Look at my record. I've always been very clear, and I don't speak in incendiary matter. I don't speak in a rough and bellicose manner. I'm not going to preach war and hate and vengeance. That is not in me. I am going to try to work to the best of my ability to bring peace between Belize and Guatemala, to become friends with Guatemala, because Guatemala is at our back. Guatemala has to watch our back, and Guatemala will never move from there. So we have to have a friend. We can't afford to have enemies at our back. We have to have friends. And so we have to find the path to friendship. That is what I'm about.
Whether or not you choose to respond to the criticisms that are levied against you in terms of how the government and obviously the Ministry of Foreign Affairs responds to the incidents that have been taking place in the Sarstoon, one of the things that we have heard from the opposition, and this took place before the change in leadership and before the election, was that it wasn't the main issue was what seemed to be a change on the Guatemalan side, their persistence, the hostility, the boldness that they exhibited within the Sarstoon when the territorial volunteers entered. And they felt that, I remember the position put forward at that point, that's when they changed, or their position on the ICJ evolved, as they refer to it. That's when they said that Guatemala was acting in bad faith. Now, I bring up the point again in terms of looking at working along with the opposition, with this advisory committee of former foreign ministers, in terms of being able to address specifically what is taking place in the Sarstoon? Or is it that you feel the last diplomatic note is sufficient and that you will continue to advise against the BTV entering into the Sarstoon?
Let me tell you, ma'am, I am guided by history. The behavior of the Guatemalan administration and regime during my time was nothing like the behavior that existed during the PUP's time. During their time, the situation was so bad that first of all, they had to agree. They could not sit down and talk with the Guatemalans because the Guatemalans said, we are no longer going to recognize a border. So to be able to even sit down and talk to the Guatemalans, they had to agree on this adjacency zone. That is how it came about. Period 2000, 2005, the Guatemalans said, we're not going to sit with you. We are not going to sit with you and talk about a boundary. You have to agree to an adjacency zone. We acceded and agreed to the adjacency zone. And then we had to have the OAS come in and do the confidence building measures. But during that period of time, the reason for that was that the Guatemalans were actually taking our soldiers and our policemen and arresting them. And then they were encouraging people to establish settlements in our country. That was the situation. It was as bad as that. Nothing like that happened when we took office. When we took office, for the first time in the history of this country, we got the Guatemalans to agree to go to the ICJ unconditionally to solve this matter. Yes. And we went further. We signed agreements, 13 agreements between us. And the president of Guatemala came right here in Placencia and said, Belize is our friend. We don't see Belize as an enemy. We see Belize as a friend, and we want to work with them. So I never saw that hostility that the PUP purported to have seen. I never saw that. I saw a country that was working with us in partnership. That's what I saw. With respect to the innocent, the people who are coming in and interfering with our chate and ruins and the like, I went to the United Nations and I condemned that wrongly. Right after that, the Guatemalans went into high gear. They got in touch with the international community, begged for assistance to finance activities for the people on the border. And that's what they are now doing, putting income-generating activities on the border with Guatemala so that their people don't have to come across the border. That is my experience with them.
Since there is this difference in opinion in terms of the Guatemalan engagement, will you be willing to work along with the opposition and their advisory committee?
I tell you again, as soon as I got into office, I wrote to each foreign minister and invited them to join with us in the education campaign. I have records of that because we are too small to be divided. We have never, ever, ever sought to vote this matter unilaterally. We have always worked together. And I'm telling you, I never went to Washington without either Amon or Lisa Schumann accompanying the delegation. And we paid all the expenses.
Now, there are two questions that I have. One, do you think there's a need for confidence-building measures in the Sarstoon?
Absolutely. And we broached that topic with the Guatemalan foreign minister at least a month ago. We have been completely on top of it. Furthermore, we were completely briefed by Alexis Rosado, who is one of the most competent ambassadors we have ever had on the situation in Guatemala. We know what the situation is on the ground. We know the strength of the president. We know what is happening in the Congress. We know the strength of the population. We know that 50% of the population in Guatemala are people 18 years and younger. We know that they suffer from terrible poverty and extreme poverty. We also know that they don't have resources, so that they don't have the capacity to properly patrol the borders, even in terms of security. We know that they have tremendous problem with drug dealers and with crime and the like. We know that they are a very fragile state. And the government is not the type of government that we have. The president doesn't have the strength that our prime minister has. The military has an overwhelming power in Guatemala, always had and still have. They are almost a law unto themselves. So one has got to deal with them very, very carefully. It is a minefield we are trying to negotiate. And Belizeans at home don't make that any easier when we do acts which the Guatemalans regard as provocative. And let me tell you, the perception is that Belizeans should be able to do whatever we want to do in our own country because that is our own country. That is how we all feel, but we can't take that attitude not even in our homes because your wife is not going to tolerate you doing what you want in the house. And I just recently I was listening to the dispute between the United Nations relating to the activities of North Korea and with their missiles and the like. And the suggestion at the United Nations was that the Americans have this missile shield defense system, which they are proposing to put in South Korea to prevent the North Koreans from, in fact, being able to inflict harm on them. And the Chinese are opposed to that because they are of the view that that would further aggravate the North Koreans. So the Chinese are saying to the Americans and the United Nations, don't do anything, even in your territory, that is going to further aggravate the North Koreans. And that's a position we have to take. We are not supposed to do anything, in my view, in our country that is going to aggravate our neighbors.
Now, what about the, I think the commandant for the VDF has confirmed that there are illegal settlements in Belize, and there has been talk that resources are scarce, and therefore we're unable to move them out. Now, you're talking, people look at it, and I'm being rational here,
Yes.
or at least I think I am, in terms of the territorial volunteers going on a trek,
Yes.
just by boat.
Yes.
And you have that kind of a heavy-handed approach by the Guatemalan military.
Yes.
Yet you have Guatemalans who have settled illegally in Belize,
Yes.
and we are sitting quietly by saying, well, we need resources to get them out.
Yes.
What's your response to people with regards to that?
Let me tell you what is the history. There's a history to it, you know. It has always been there. They have always been coming in and settling and getting off. Under the PUP administration, they couldn't do anything other than what we are doing now. You work along with the Organization of American States. And I will tell you how this, how the Organization of American States work with us to do it. They sought, certainly in the past, they sought funding from the international friends of the region who provided funds, and with those funds they bought lands in Guatemala, built homes in Guatemala, and then invited the people to come off. That is how it has been handled in the past, and I imagine that is how we will continue to handle it. You may want to tell me what are the options. Do we go in and bulldoze them and run them off? Or what will be the consequences of that? Every action has a reaction. There are consequences. When you are in a position, you're in a very different position from when you are in government. Government people have to be very mature, very informed, and have to behave in a very measured way. We cannot knee-jerk, and we cannot be belligerent and bellicose, particularly when you're a weak state. Small, weak state. We have to understand our capacity.
But Minister, when you speak about provocation, and that is really what you have called the actions by the BTV.
I'm saying that's how the Guatemalans perceive it.
Yes. And wouldn't it be the same perception that we as Belizeans have when the civilians come into Belizean territory, take our resources, settle their homes, build roads? We see that as provocation. And what is going to be the response by the Belizean government in terms of these actions?
Listen to this. We have the military who are dealing with it even as we speak. Even as we speak. But even when we are dealing with it at the military level and the police level, one has got to deal with it with a measure of care, because the slightest thing that goes wrong, not only the Guatemalans are go down on us, but also the international community. And we cannot afford to be ostracized or to be put in a negative light by the international community. So it's for that reason that we have the OAS office there. And I must emphasize that the OAS is the organization that represents every country in this hemisphere, from America, Canada, to Argentina, all our CARICOM countries. All of us are in it. So the suggestion that Belizean people hate the OAS, it has to be ridiculous. It has to be out of an absence of knowledge. Because if you knew what the OAS means to us, that is perhaps one of our greatest safeguards in our problem with Guatemala. That is why the Secretary General presides over all our meetings. So we have to teach our people and explain to our Belizean people that these are the people who will save us. Now that we have this problem with Guatemala, we have already been meeting with all the diplomats, you know. We have met with the British, we have met with the Americans. We'll be meeting with all of them to brief them, because in the final analysis, that is where our security lies.
Are we seeking support from them, or simply providing an update as to what is taking place on the ground?
Belize will not survive without the support of these nations.
Okay, what type of support are we asking from them?
Every type. But in all these issues, the most successful instrument has been diplomacy. So we will have our friends in the United States and our friends in the UK talk to the Guatemalans, to get the Guatemalans to come around and agree, particularly to have protocols established in the Sarstoon so that we can better manage the situation. That has always been done. That is done continuously. Even when we don't take the initiative, our friends will contact us and take the initiative.
Minister, in different quarters, you have people who are very upset about the way your ministry handles this particular issue. Mm-hmm. And while you've stated that you do not want to see this issue become a political football, and you've extended and made every effort to connect with the People's United Party, there are people who across the country feel as if though this issue has not, there has been a softening of the response by your ministry.
And that is largely, William, because they don't know the history. Between 1971 to 1981, if you were to see the kind of things that were on the table being discussed by our leaders, you would be amazed. The discussions involve ceding from right down from Punta Gorda to the rest of PG. Those were the discussions that were being dealt with during the PRP time. The discussion was making Belize an associate state of Guatemala. Those were part of the discussions. People don't know that. People don't know the truth, but it is there in the history books. The discussions involve giving away from just below Stan Creek all the way to the Punta Gorda, all the Zapadilla Keys. The Betwell-Webster proposal and the heads of agreement would have given Guatemala control over foreign affairs, or defense, or keys, or roads. Belizeans don't know those things. It's for those reasons that I say Belizeans need to read, so that we know what the history is. You can only judge my actions and what this administration is doing properly by knowing what happened in the past. It was under the past administration that we lost what we call our border, and we have an adjacency zone. It was under the last administration that we lost our 12-mile territorial seas, and we have a 3-mile territorial sea. These are concession appeasement which the last administration made. Belizeans don't know that. But that is in the history books.
But asking people not to access the area, or suggesting that perhaps it is not in their best interest, could be seen as a concession as well.
No, we have a responsibility as a government to say to you, we can't tell you not to go, but it is imprudent to do that because you are putting yourselves and others in harm's way. Shouldn't a government do that?
So the preference is that civilians not access the area?
That is a preference for me.
Okay.
And let me be clear on that, because my own sense is that the ordinary Belizean fishermen and ordinary Belizean fisher folk go there freely. They fish in the waters, they ply the waters. As a matter of fact, one will recall very clearly that the first time these territorial volunteers went into those waters, they got lost somewhere all the way into the Guatemalan waters, not even Belizean waters. The Guatemalans didn't do them anything really. But I'm saying there's a perception. There's a perception from the Guatemalans that these people are not just visitors who want to come and visit, but that these are people who are in fact asserting claims. That is their perception. And I will tell you, in the face of that perception, they are going to respond in the only way they know how. They believe that they have to defend their country, and they will respond in that way. Do we agree with it? We don't agree with it. We understand. I certainly understand. And this happens all over the world. So,
but
my
could
own
that
position
not be seen as a concession?
No, it's not a concession, ma'am. Talking to them is not a concession, and explaining to your people is not a concession. How are you conceding anything? You are simply saying to your citizens, be careful. You run the risk of being hurt or being incarcerated. And I will tell you this.
But by people who are illegally entering the country.
No, man, I'm saying the place is contested. We have a view, they have a view. And that is a difficulty when you're dealing with the international community, because the international community are saying to us, I have talked to our friends, and they are reluctant to take sides in this thing. Because they say, Mr. Elrington, we are friends with Mexico, Guatemala, as well as with you. We don't want to have to force to take sides. It's for that reason that we are trying to help you all to get it resolved, so that we have, from the highest authority, exactly where your borders are. So that is a problem. We don't have that definitive position as to where our borders are from the highest authority. It's for that reason that we're going to the ICJ, or we want to go there.
So we have been talking, obviously, I don't want to just focus on that particular issue. There are other issues related to the Guatemala-Belize defendum that needs to be looked at. For example, the amendment to the compromise, which is still before Congress.
Yes.
What kind of a timeline are we looking at?
Yes.
In terms of
yes.
from the government's perspective?
Good question. We would like it to happen yesterday, but Guatemala is a sovereign state, so we can't tell them how to conduct their legislative calendar and agenda. The most we can do, William, is to urge our friends, to urge the Guatemalan Congress to get it done with as quickly as possible. That is what we do, and we continue to do that every day.
Now, as a follow-up, prior to independence, there was what was termed an internationalization of this issue that brought a favor to Belize and led to our independence.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a need for that kind of a concerted effort once again?
Most Belizeans don't understand the internationalization. If you read the history of the internationalization again, you are going to be amazed at what you read. You're going to be amazed. Asa Schumann has a very good book on it that gives you the detail. There were two issues there, you know. One was getting independence, and one was getting the claim dropped. And the negotiators of Belize, in the process of internationalizing it, were forced to make concessions. Terrible concessions. As a matter of fact, I said we were put into a very difficult position, because here we wanted to get our independence, but here we were being forced to make concessions to get it because of the Guatemalan claim. It wasn't that we should have gotten independence from maybe early 60s. From 64 we get self-government, but because of the Guatemalan claim. And the Americans were fearful that we become a basket case and have to depend upon them. The Mexicans were fearful. The Guatemalans claimed to have been afraid that we were going to be used as a communist safe house for communist Cuba and the like. So we had a problem. You had a problem, and it is because of that problem that all these concessions were being made to Guatemala to make Guatemala agree not to oppose our independence or not to invade us. And those proposals persisted until 1981, March of 1981, under what is called a Heads of Agreement. It was when the opposition opposed the Heads of Agreement and shut down the country of Belize for like 2 weeks, that they sent a man named Nicholas Ridley from the Foreign Office in Guatemala. And he came down, and 3 months later on, we got our independence with no strings attached. Completely independent without having to give Guatemala anything. Regretfully, since 1981, we have been sliding. Because since 1981 that we have an adjacency zone and we have a 3-mile territorial sea. But that was not the case in 1981. 1981 we had a border and we had our 12 miles. So we are retrogressing. And the longer we take and the more dispute we have about this thing internally, I'm afraid we can run the risk of finding ourselves just like the Palestinians found themselves in Israel. We've got to take very, very careful steps in resolving this matter.
One other question that we keep talking about, the need for an articulation of where we stand. And actually, I have one other question before that one. Because we've been talking, you talk about the lack of understanding and knowledge of the history.
Yes.
We've been talking about an educational campaign, and I know there was I would say, a department within the ministry set up particularly with that in mind. Where are we with that today?
We have a campaign. It has been going on. It has not been, to my mind, sufficiently intense, and I think one of the reasons for that is financial constraints. But it is there. I think the man who has been spearheading it is Ambassador Stuart Leslie, and he has assured me that they have been going all over the place. I myself recently spoke to the Bar Association on it. I was scheduled to speak yesterday to the Association of Principals. I myself want to go and speak to everybody, because one of the problems I find is that there is so much misinformation and so much absence of knowledge. Even people who speak on this matter seemingly in an authoritative manner don't know. They actually don't have the information, and there is really no excuse for us not to have the information because it exists, but people don't want to read. So we have to find some way to get it across to them. It's so important.
Now, with that said, the second question that I have has to do with the whole idea of an articulation of Belize's foreign policy with regards to how we handle Guatemala.
Yes.
People see it as a very kind of a knee-jerk kind of reaction based on the incidents that occur, or whether we're discussing the compromise, etc. When will we see an articulation of a policy that is comprehensive, deals with a lot of consultation, and has the two-party, bipartisan kind of approach to it, to make sure that this is something that, regardless of who comes into power, we will stay the course and it will be clear to people as to where we are?
We have a very, very clear policy, which we have been pursuing. I've said over and over and over, I took over from where the People's United Party left off. Asad Schuman said to me that when we signed the compromise, he came to me and said to me, "Isn't it true, Wilfred, that I was the one who set the stage for this to happen?" Because it started in 2007 when they agreed that in the event, 2005, in the event that negotiation did not seem to prove that it would be successful, the decision would be left to the Secretary General to decide what to do. That was set up by them. The Secretary General made a proposal in 2007 for the matter to go to the International Court of Justice. When we came into office in 2008, we agreed to that.
Will we see that policy articulated in black and white?
That is in records. That's part of our historical records. That's the signing of those agreements were done publicly in Washington as well as in Guatemala. It's historical record. And it's part of a process that was clearly articulated. The only thing that is left, really, is for us as a joint nation to educate our people on it. But we had problem with the opposition because they had division in their party, particularly people from South. The 4 representatives from the South said publicly they were not going to go to any ICJ. This new leader is taking a different position, and he has in fact appointed perhaps the best informed people in the country, the most knowledgeable and the most informed people in the country, to now advise him and his party. And it is hoped that based on that advice, the party will be able to take a collective view that the ICJ is the best way to go. Once we're in a position to take a collective view that the ICJ is the best way to go, then we can then go to our international partners and say, please help us to get the financing to do the proper education program and to go to the ICJ.
And in the interim, because I think this is the most fundamental point, in the interim between the protocol being signed by Congress in Guatemala, the process of the referendum being undertaken in Guatemala and Belize, whether on the same day, separate day, whatever is decided on, and eventually the road to the ICJ, how do you assert Belize's sovereignty? How do you, as the representative of this country, assure the public that we are doing what is necessary to ensure that our territory remains intact?
All right, let me tell you what we have done so far. We have sent off a protest note to them. We are meeting with the international representatives who are here, the ambassadors from the various countries. We were scheduled to go to Washington on the 6th of April to meet with the Secretary General to apprise him of the situation. But we have brought it up now. We have brought it up to go on the 15th. So we are doing all in our power, all that can be done diplomatically to resolve it. There is no other thing that we can do. But if you can think of something else that you think we can do, we will be happy to take it on board and to implement it.
Okay, and equally with that, what do you say to the Belizean people who are very concerned at this time? As a man who is elected by the people of Belize, what do you say to them?
I am saying to you, the people who pass me on the street, tell me, Mr. Elrington, I'm very happy with the way you are handling this matter. Thank you. There is a small group of people who have, from the time I started in my office, I think within the first 6 months, burnt me in effigy. That group has only continued. It hasn't increased. And since that time, I have gone to the polls 2 or 3 times, and I've been returned to office against overwhelming odds. If the Belizean people, the majority of the Belizean people, were of the view that what we were doing was bad or wrong, they would have voted us out of office. They obviously are satisfied with what we are doing. There will always be those who are critical. They have their own personal reasons for that. And those who are critical, as far as I know, I have not seen them in the society doing anything for anybody but themselves. I don't see them helping the youth. I don't see them helping the unwed mothers. I don't see them helping anybody but themselves. They're using this seemingly political, patriotic thing as a cloak. But in truth and in fact, when you look at what they are doing in the society, how else are they showing their patriotism? Not by doing for the elderly, the youth, and the others. I don't see them doing that kind of thing.
Okay, Minister.
So the 15th of this month,
I will be going to Washington.
is that a bipartisan delegation?
As I've said,
So there has been an invitation,
we are going to be sending out. We're just finalizing the time now because we yesterday we got the breakthrough that we could do it to the 15th. I've just notified the cabinet yesterday. Yesterday we had a meeting, and so we're just finalizing. And today we should inform the opposition. And we have never gone to Washington to meet with the OAS without a member of the People's United Party. Never. And we pay all the expenses involved. The only time I think they didn't go was just before the election when they had their own personal political reasons not to attend one meeting, but that was not because of us. We have always been open, and I will repeat, I wrote to every one of them inviting them to work with us to education process for this ICJ issue.
All right.
Minister,
well, we want to
thank you for joining us today.
I want to thank you too for having me, and thank Belizeans for being so patient and to be so sensible. Whenever Belize has been in trouble, it is the ordinary Belizean people who have taken us out of trouble. Whether it was a 1798 September fight with the Spaniards, or the heads of agreement or the verbs of proposal, the ordinary Belizean people went out in the streets and protected Belize. I want to thank them for that.
Thank you very much, Minister.
You're very welcome.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, it's for Broke It Down with Miss Jenny, so stay tuned.